Hey, my friends. Thanks for joining me today. We're going to be talking about getting through negative emotion. I mean, sometimes feeling low is just downright difficult. Um, and sometimes it feels like you're never going to get out of it. So we're going to be talking today about emotional cycles and ultimately how you can get through negative emotion. This will be especially helpful if you feel that you are sometimes on an emotional roller coaster or if you tend to get bogged down by negative emotion. So, how are we going to walk through this? The agenda is first, I'm going to introduce a framework. I'm calling it a framework. Um, it's completely made up by me. There might be like official and interesting frameworks out there for describing emotional cycles. Um, I didn't look into any of that. I just am proposing or sharing a framework to describe emotional cycles, and this is based on my own experience. Um, so we'll do that first. Then I'll talk about a few common mistakes when navigating emotion, especially negative emotion. And then finally, I'll share the one emotion that allows you to experience emotional cycles with grace and ease. Um, so let's get to it. Let's talk about the framework. Before I go into the detail of a framework for emotional cycles, I have to first remind us all um, what is emotion and what creates emotion. Emotion, here's how I'd like to talk about it. Emotion is vibrations in your body. Um, there's chemical reaction and there's vibration. That's a really simplistic way to describe it. Um, and I find it particularly useful for this framework I'm going to use. So, once I describe the framework, you'll understand why this definition also is useful. So, emotions are vibrations in your body. And what creates those emotions? Where do they come from? They come from your thoughts, they come from the things you're thinking. And so, there's a sentence in your mind, or in other words, a thought. And that thought then creates these vibrations. And you can experience these vibrations in various ways. Each motion feels a little bit different. Um, and this definition, this idea about emotion that thoughts create, it can actually become problematic. Sometimes we can use it against ourselves because we're like, oh well, if thoughts what are creating emotion, and if I have control over my thoughts, every time I'm feeling negative emotion, I'm just a lazy, undisciplined person who doesn't know how to control their thoughts and doesn't know how to manage their brain and has something terribly wrong. None of that's true. This can cause a lot of problem when you start to use this against yourself. Um, it's I do believe that we have a whole lot of power. We have a whole lot of control over our mind and our emotions. I do believe you can feel however you want to in your circumstances. Regardless of your circumstances, you can feel however you want. However, we're not wired that way. Our The way that we develop is in a way that allows us to and is a more natural state to feel all kinds of emotion. And we are not wired to feel positive no matter our circumstances. Is it possible to feel positive emotion no matter what? I would say yes. But to get there, to create that, I that would be a whole lot of effort and it'd be completely different than the way that we're wired. And honestly, I don't know if we would want that. If we were feeling positive no matter what, that's actually we have a different way to describe those kinds of people. They're not people, they're robots. No emotion, no variation in feeling. You become more like a machine, a robot, a piece of technology, something like that. We're human, and I think one of the beautiful parts about being human is experiencing all these emotions and coming or developing in a way that wires us to not only feel one emotion all the time, but to feel many emotions. And so to describe that emotional experience, I'm introducing this idea of a cycle, an emotional cycles, different emotional cycles we go through, um, positive and negative emotion. So the framework I'm going to use, I mean, a framework might be a little bit of a fancy term. It's really another way to think about it is a metaphor. So here's a metaphor, and it is using the concept of sound waves and hearing. Um, by the way, I'm going to be sharing all these notes for folks who are on my email list. If you're not on my email list, there's a link in the notes that says more content. You can submit there, and then you'll receive the notes on this, so that you get the details of this framework and um, details about the common mistakes and the one emotion that will allow you to experience emotional cycles with grace and ease. And so if you'd like to get some more notes and to just receive more content from me in general, you can find that link in the notes of this, in the notes or comments of this video or audio file. Okay, so here's the metaphor, and it comes from my experience and my focus recently on hearing and sound waves because my daughter, who's turning 4 soon, she was born deaf and she has bilateral sensorineural hearing loss and she has profound hearing loss, which means she really doesn't get any sound until maybe the sound of a jet engine, something extremely loud like that. That's when she begins to hear. And so over these past 3.5, almost 4 years, of course, I've been learning a whole lot about sound and hearing. And so this concept of sound waves offers a bit of a framework and a whole lot of similarity to emotional cycles. So if you're watching the video form, I'm gonna show you here. This comes from a little book that we've shared with her. If you're listening to this, that's okay. I'm going to describe this in detail, but here's the two basic type of sound waves. We have fast sound waves and slow sound waves. Fast sound waves create a higher pitch. This would be like a bird chirping or a whistle. Um, the clanging of silverware. Those would all be high pitches. Of course, when those occurrences happen, a bird chirping, clanging of silverware, something like that, um, there's movement of air. And that movement of air, the vibration going through the air is fast. And that's what's creating the high pitch, or that movement ultimately is converted through the hearing process and interpreted by your brain as a high pitch. So that is uh, fast sound waves, and they create high pitch. And then you have slow sound waves, and those create low pitches. A low pitch would be something like a drum. Well, a big drum that creates a lower sound. And so there's a few things to observe here. And like one way to think about emotional cycles, I'm going to share the observations in a minute. Before I do that, I just want to make sure the connection is clear. So I'm going to use this example or this framework to describe broadly two types of emotional cycles. We have fast cycles, similar to fast sound waves, and we have slow emotional cycles, similar to slow sound waves. Um, so now there's a few things we observe, right? There's three observations about sound waves. Um, I chose words that all start with the same letter because I think alliteration is kind of fun. And so they all start with the letter N. These are the three N's. Three N's of sound waves. And these also apply to emotions or emotional cycles. The first is neutrality. The ear is designed to receive both types of sound waves. Illustration. Alliteration. I meant alliteration. Words, consecutive words that start with the same letter. Alliteration. Is that what I said earlier? I just want to make sure I corrected that. Okay. Um, all right. The first N is neutrality. The ear is designed to receive both types of sound waves. It receives fast sound waves and it receives slow sound waves, and it knows how to handle both of them. One type of sound wave is not preferred by another. Um, so let me ask you this. How is it true that your body is designed to receive all types of emotions and emotional cycles? And I'm breaking this down. This is true for sounds and for emotions. The example I gave is just fast or slow, but of course there's so much in between. There's all kinds of speeds of sound waves, and there's all kinds of emotions. There's and emotional cycles. There's not just fast ones and slow ones. There's all kinds of different type in between. And in every case, the ear is designed to receive every type of sound wave. It knows what to do with every type of sound wave, and our bodies know what to do with every type of emotional cycle and every type of emotion. Okay, that's the first N. Neutrality. Neutrality. The second N is necessity. When it comes to hearing, and especially when it comes to the topic of language, um, both types of sound waves are necessary. The fast sound waves and the slow sound waves are necessary to access all language because language has some sounds that are slow sound waves and it has other sounds that are fast. A classic example, I mean, we can just look at, for example, consonants. Um, you have consonants like d, m, n, z. Listen to those consonants. Those types of sounds are slow waves, slow sound waves, or low pitches, right? And then we have other consonants like t, s, f, h. Do you hear the difference? Those sound waves are fast. And those fast sound waves are being received and interpreted as high pitch, and then we understand them and hear them as high pitches. And they're actually at quite different speeds. Those slow sound waves, the z, j, have a frequency of 250 hertz, right? Um, we don't need to go into detail about hertz, but just to illustrate the range. The other consonants I shared that have high pitches that are fast sound waves, f, s, t, h, those are in the range of 4 to 5,000 hertz. And then these are all estimates. Don't quote me. I might be like, these are like, I might not be exactly right here. Uh, but roughly. And the whole point is to illustrate, again, the range. So you have a range of slow sound waves of 250 all the way up to over 4,000 hertz speed. So 250 to 4,000, that's the range of speed that we get when it comes to sound waves. And that range is um, just when it comes to language. There's even more range than that. There's even lower sounds and there's even higher sounds, even faster sound waves and even slower sound waves. But just to access language, you need that kind of range. You need all types of speeds, fast sound waves and slow ones. So that's necessity, right? You need all of it to get full access to language and other things. So the second N is necessity. So think about this when it comes to emotional cycles. Um, what do the different emotional cycles allow us to access more fully in life? Um, all right, let's move on to the final N. Nonlinear. Sound waves don't go in a straight line. They don't stay headed in the same direction. They are going one direction only until a certain point. And then they change direction. And that is the same with emotion. How might knowing about the non-linear nature, excuse me, how might knowing about the non-linear nature of emotional cycles impact the way you experience each emotion? Okay, um, so we have these emotional cycles, fast ones and slow ones. And let me expound on that just a little bit. When I talk about fast emotional cycles, what that might look like, or how you might experience that, is um, maybe just in the morning, maybe just in the morning time, just in half of your day, you experience three, at least three different moments where you are in some positive emotion. And then you also experience at least three different moments where you're in negative emotions. So just within that short time frame of half of a day, you experience this fast cycle up and down quickly of emotion. So this might be described as the emotional roller coaster, right? It's like up and down and it moves quickly. The slow emotional cycle will look more like a low, and that low can be for a day or 2 days, maybe a week. It'll just last for a longer period of time. That's a slow emotional cycle. And so think about this, whether you are on a kind of having a roller coaster experience or this slower cycle of positive and negative emotion, regardless of what cycle you're experiencing or where you are in that, there's neutrality, there's necessity, and there's nonlinear. See how just imagine with me and consider how these three ends, these three observations about sound waves can also be true and observed in emotion and emotional cycles. Neutrality, necessity, and nonlinear. The other thing is that you have a norm. There likely is somewhere along that continuum of fast emotional cycles and slow emotional cycles, that is your norm. And that's so common. That's again how we're wired. And we all might have a different norm. And again, a fast emotional cycle or slow emotional cycle isn't good or bad. What if it's neutral, right? What if the body is designed? Actually, we know that. We know the body is designed to receive all types of emotions and all types of emotional cycles, whether it's fast or slow. Guess what? Your body knows what to do with it. It's taking that vibration inside you, all different types of vibrations, all types of emotions, fast and slow, and however long they stay or go, your body knows what to do with them. They're not dangerous to be there. And to experience the fullness of life, to be something much more rich and dynamic than a robot, it's necessary to have all types of emotion. And emotions don't, once they are headed in a direction, if it's some negative emotion, it's not going to stay. It's only going to stay in that direction for until a certain point, and then it will change direction. Emotional cycles are nonlinear, similar to how sound waves are nonlinear. Um, so here's something that commonly happens. Anything outside of the norm can be alarming. Uh, um, and and so this is what I'm going to share a little bit about my experience recently, because my norm, I would say I err more on the continuum of fast emotional cycle. I will experience some pretty quick up like highs and lows, positives and negative emotions throughout the day. Um, but occasionally I find myself in a slow emotional cycle, and that happened over the past week. I had a period of like 3 to 5 days where like pretty much the entire time I was in negative emotion. Um, and that was really unusual. It was really slow. I stayed there for a while, and I had this like sense of like I also just did a lot of I'll talk about what I did in just a moment. But what I found happening was like I had this kind of underlying belief rooted in meaninglessness. Meaninglessness. Everything seemed meaningless, you know? And and you might see this happen. It's really fascinating. It might be related to your pain. It could be related to some other physical limitation that you're facing, or a loved one that has some physical limitation, how those things are impacting you. It might be related to one of those things, and you might have a certain like frustration related to it. And then you find that you're not just frustrated about that pain, you're also frustrated about other things like work or kids or your career or your home or your bed or the brightness of the lights in your bedroom. I don't know. Whatever else it is, other things might start showing up and you're like feeling frustrated. And so this lens of frustration, or in my case, meaninglessness, starts to um, become what you're viewing and experiencing of many things. And that's what it was for me. It was again like 3 to 5 days. I can't remember exactly how long. It was like somewhere in that range. It was at least 3 days. It was like 3 to 5 days, and it started in one area of my life, but then it was like spilling into another and then another, and I'm like, man, everything just feels so meaningless. And things I usually am really passionate about, really excited about, all of a sudden was meaningless. And this was a slow emotional cycle. So not only was I feeling that negative emotion, but I also was noticing the change in cycle. I'm like, I'm used to having some negative emotion and then coming back to some others type of emotions and having some positive emotion. But this was staying in a negative space longer than usual. And so here's a few common mistakes that we make. Mistake number one, we make negative thoughts and emotions mean something's wrong with us. Mistake number two, when we're experiencing a different emotional cycle than our norm, we conclude that something's wrong. And mistake number three, we make life or career or other changes, big changes, while experiencing a negative emotion. Um, if we think about these three ends, neutrality, necessity, and nonlinear, when it comes to fast emotional cycles and slow emotional cycles when it comes to all types of emotions. We'll no longer make the mistake of thinking that something's wrong with us when we're feeling negative. Nothing's wrong. And your body's designed to experience that negative emotion. And when we experience a change in cycle, um, when we experience an emotional cycle that's different than our norm, we'll acknowledge again that nothing's wrong. In fact, it's necessary, right? The second N of necessity. It's necessary to have fast cycles and slow cycles. It's necessary to experience that, to be human, to be rich, dynamic humans. And then what often happens when we're experiencing negative emotion or a change in emotional cycle is we think when we believe there's something wrong, we have some urgency to try and make a change. Make a change. And it can be a number of different changes we try to make. But when we reduce the belief that there's something wrong, then it's easier to ride the wave, to let the change in emotional cycle happen, or to let the negative emotion be there without urgently trying to change our circumstances or trying to make changes in our life. Because often what we're doing in that case, if we're trying to make changes, we're trying to solve the problem with the wrong solution. Because actually when we make changes in our life or to our circumstance, this reality of having positive and negative emotion and this reality of having different emotional cycles, sometimes fast ups and downs, sometimes slow ups and downs, this is still going to be part of our life. It's still going to be part of our experience, even when we make life changes, circumstance changes, even if our whatever, if there's a chronic condition or physical limitation that you're experiencing, even if that were to change, you would still experience, just like sound waves, up and down in your emotional experience. It would still be that way. All right. So, what is the one emotion that will allow you to move through this with grace and ease? It is compassion. Compassion. And I have found compassion to be the most powerful emotion to get through these cycles, to experience them in such a different way, to experience them in the way that I'm not so bogged down and feeling so weighed down and feeling so heavy or feeling discouraged or disappointed. Compassion is the way through positive and negative emotions and it's the way through the cycles. So here's just a few tools or beliefs or thoughts for you to consider to create compassion while experiencing the dynamic nature of emotions and the human experience. So here's a few of these thoughts or tools. I accept my emotions as they are. I am whole no matter my emotional experience. And these thoughts, these are some beliefs that I have cultivated that I believe. And you might not believe all of them, but maybe there's one or two that you do, or maybe there's another version of them that you would believe. Whatever whatever flavor or version of these that you might believe are what you can bring your attention to when you're experiencing negative emotion or a change in emotional cycle and you're like kind of worried there's something wrong and what's going on and this doesn't feel great and all those things. How to access compassion is through these kinds of beliefs, these kinds of thoughts or beliefs. And it's simply just remembering in those moments to bring your attention to these. They're not necessarily going to change the emotion. Like the negative emotion might will likely still be there, but you can approach it and experience it from a place of compassion with some of these beliefs. So Again, I accept my emotions as they are. I am whole no matter my emotional experience. My negative emotion is what I'm supposed to be feeling. I do not need to take swift action toward anything. It is safe to keep things as they are. I don't need to sound the alarm. I'm okay as I am right now. I don't feel great, and that's okay. I can handle this for however long it wants to stay, and I can keep living my life. That last one is interesting because it's almost like a little bit of trickery. It's a little bit of trickery to get to compassion and acceptance, to really embrace this idea that it can stay, negative emotion can stay, or this roller coaster ride can stay, or this lull, this long, slow emotional cycle can stay however long it wants. But I also know that it's not. It's not going to stay. I know that because nonlinear. Sound waves are nonlinear. Emotional cycles are nonlinear. It's not going to stay going in the same one direction forever. It's going to change directions. Um, I'm gonna leave you with a few questions to explore. And again, if you want to get these notes and these questions, if you're not already on the email list, you can click more content and you'll get it that way. So, questions to explore. Especially when you're experiencing negative emotion or in a different emotional cycle that maybe is alarming to you, you can ask yourself these kinds of questions. What releases tension, or what will release tension? Another question can be, what emotional experience feels appropriate right now? Because in this, for example, this recent cycle where I just felt this kind of detachment, this meaninglessness, I kept asking myself that question, like, what feels appropriate? Um, and it was interesting because I just didn't feel like I was ready or in a place to feel differently. And that's perhaps why I end up in a slow cycle. And I accepted that. And I was okay with that. Um, I actually felt more releasing, more relieving, more open to me. And so that's not always the answer. There's other times when I ask this question, like what experience feels appropriate right now. Sometimes I I'm I'm willing or ready or able to access something different, and I can get there pretty quickly. Okay, another question to explore: what position does my body want to be in? If you think about these emotions being vibrations in your body, um, you can ask that question and see kind of what position your body wants to be in, or what movement would your body like, given this type of vibration it's experiencing, the type of emotion you're experiencing. And finally, how can I use my breath and my body to reassure myself? Okay, my friends, that is it for today. A bit of a framework for emotional cycles using a metaphor or a parallel example of hearing and sound waves. We reviewed the common mistakes when navigating emotion and talked about the one emotion that allows you to experience emotional cycles with greater grace and ease. Please feel free to ask any questions, comment, share other things that are working for you. Thank you so much for engaging, and until next time, bye everyone.